Hey everyone!
Hi!
Welcome back to our channel. My name is Ruth.
And my name is Liz.
And today we will be giving you advice on applying to Canadian medical schools. So this video is for anyone who has already written their MCAT and is now working on applying to Canadian medical schools. So specifically, we are going to be discussing how to go about choosing the schools you will apply for. Number 2, starting the application process. Number 3, references. Number 4, completing the application, specifically about how to describe your extracurricular activities, as well as how to go about the supplementary application. Number 5, just finishing up your application, editing and submitting. And then we're just going to end off with some final tips that we have for you guys.
So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Okay, so our first point of advice will focus on how to go about selecting schools to apply to. First, we recommend finding a list of all the medical schools in Canada and reading more about them. You can find this list on Wikipedia or any other online pages. To our knowledge, there are 17 medical schools. So find their admissions website and go through their most recent application manual, which will talk about the application requirements. We also recommend going through their important notices and deadlines page to keep up to date with any changes to deadlines or the application process. I will also link a summary table below created by Oxford Seminars about the requirements and application deadlines for 13 of the 17 schools. But I will warn you that the information in this table is a little less accurate for those that are applying either during the pandemic or after the pandemic. So for example, in 2019, the U Alberta application deadline was October 1st versus in 2020 was October 15th. So just double check those deadlines using the admission website for each school. So when you do look up these schools and read more about them, what should you be looking for? There are many things, but here are some of the things we recommend. So 1, look at the values of the school, either in their academic plans or the value sections or the About Us section. Some schools are more focused on academics, others more on research, while some others have programs more oriented towards advocacy, diversity, equity, and community work. While all schools value these things, different schools have varying levels of interest in each of these sections. So make sure the schools you are applying to align with your personal values and interests. And then this goes hand in hand with the first point, but secondly, look at the different programs offered at the school that you as a future medical student could participate in. For example, do they have good research programs you could take part in while in school or in the summers? For me, I have a strong interest in global health, particularly in East Africa. So I specifically prioritize schools with strong global health programs I could participate in. This put U Alberta and U Toronto at the top of my list, as they both have well-established global health connections in East Africa through their public health programs. So I would recommend you do the same based on your personal interests. Third, look at the different program lengths and layouts. While all 17 schools will result in you graduating with an MD, not all of them require the same number of years. I would say most schools have 4-year programs where you get approximately 4 months off in the spring/summer of first and second year, while other schools such as McMaster and UCalgary are only 3 years in length but run for about 11 months of the year. So consider, how long do you need to take? Are you in a rush to finish school? Do you already have a somewhat good grasp of the specialty you might be interested in and maybe need less time to figure it out? Do you like a high-paced learning environment? Or do you need more time? Want your summers off to do research, travel, or spend time with family? All of these things are important to consider. For me personally, I know I wanted to do summer research, but I'm also the type of person that needs a little more time for breaks, and I might not excel as well in a higher paced environment. So I prioritized 4-year programs, although I still applied to UCalgary for other reasons. While Liz, for example, I know is a bit of a faster learner, has a lot more endurance than I do, so she would excel perfectly fine through UCalgary's 3-year program. So 4th thing to consider is location. Do you want to move to that city or province? Would you prefer to stay closer to home and family? Are you a more mature applicant who already has a family of their own and so moving could be quite difficult for you? So do you have a support network where you are already and would worry about moving away from that? Can you afford to live in certain places? Like, for example, living costs in Vancouver and Toronto are a lot higher than other places, so maybe that might be a challenge for you. Although you can receive some supports through student loans and a professional student line of credit, but maybe you worry about graduating with a lot of debt. It is up to you to decide how much this factor would impact your decision. For me, I was all right with investing in my studies even if it meant graduating with a lot of debt, but social support networks are quite important to me, so I prioritize places where I had friends or extended family already living there. On that same note of location, consider what type of applicant the schools you are applying for are prioritizing. Some schools categorize students as being either in province or out of province, and depending on the category you fit, your GPA and MCAT requirements might be different. I know for U Alberta, UBC, and U Calgary, in-province students are prioritized. For example, according to UBC's website, UBC only allocates up to 10% of their seats to out-of-province students. Some schools go as far as prioritizing students from a specific part of a province. For example, Northern Ontario's medical school prioritizes students from Northern Ontario or Northern rural Canadian backgrounds. While most of my mentors did advise me to apply as broadly as possible because you never know who is going to accept or reject you, as someone from a low-income background, that was not something I could afford to do. So I had to prioritize the schools I had the best shot of being accepted to, as my budget was limited. Your decision will depend on your budget. Also with location, different schools have different ways of calculating GPA, and this may impact your eligibility, either negatively or positively, depending on where you are coming from. So for example, coming from the health sciences program at U Calgary, I'll be honest in saying a lot of us were heavily disadvantaged by the conversion system for Ontario and BC especially. At U Calgary, both an A and an A+ are considered a 4.0 GPA. As well, each course was allowed to select their own threshold for what a percentage grade would convert to in a letter grade. So for example, the majority of health sciences courses after first year set the minimum threshold for A- at about 85 to 87%, and an A grade was 90 or above, while an A+ is equal to 96 or 97 and above. However, for Ontario schools, according to OMSAS, a percentage grade of about 85 to 87 is the minimum threshold for an A, while 90 to 94 is the minimum for an A+, compared to that like 96 to 97+% at U Calgary. And so an A equals a 3.9 GPA for OMSAS, while a 4.0 is only given to A+ letter grades. And an A is equal to or greater than 80%. This is problematic for U Calgary students coming from certain programs because the application system for Ontario schools only looks at the letter grade you received and not the percentage when you are coming from U Calgary. As a result, if a health sciences student from U Calgary applies to an Ontario school with a 90% average, which at U Calgary again is considered to be equivalent to an A and a 4.0 GPA, in Ontario, that student is considered to have a 3.9 GPA based on that letter grade alone. So meaning you'd have to get about 5 to 7% higher in each of your classes at U Calgary than the students from Ontario to get that same GPA. And the impact the conversion system has on your GPA gets worse with the further down you go from an A grade. And this probably affects other programs and other schools too, but this is the system we are currently working with and were working with when we applied. This disadvantage also extends to UBC's conversion system, which you can read about on their page. I have attached the conversion table for Ontario in the description box below so you can see for yourself how your GPA might be affected. For me personally, this conversion system meant that my GPA applying to Ontario was about 0.27 less than what I actually received at U Calgary. As a result, I knew I would be a less competitive applicant for Ontario schools, which again meant that for the sake of time and for money, I reduced the number of schools I applied to in Ontario, and I also did not apply to UBC as a result of the disadvantage I would have in terms of the GPA conversion and also being out of province for UBC. Although UBC has always been one of my top choices based on their global health program as well as location. So maybe I might apply for residency there, but I just knew my chances were way too low applying for medical school. Again, I'm not trying to deter you from applying to certain schools, but I just want you to provide, or I just want you to have as much information as possible so you are making an informed decision when you're applying to these schools. But I do know that there are some students that are applying that come from a low income background the way I did, and so this information is important for them. And time-wise, each of these applications take quite a while. And personally, I only had a little over 1 month to spare in my schedule, so I decided I would prefer quality over quantity. So I only applied to 5 schools, but I spent a lot of time on each application.
So now that you've selected your top schools, let's move on to actually starting the application. So there are 17 medical schools in Canada, each with their own unique deadlines, requirements, and the like. So the first tip to planning your application is to create somewhat of an info guide that has, information and key details for each respective school, so that you essentially have information consolidated and pulled onto one platform or document. The second tip, don't forget to send in your transcripts. Enough said. And third tip is to familiarize yourself with the CanMed rules. We'll touch more on this more in depthly when we talk about references and creating your supplementary applications.
Okay, so next thing to research when selecting school is the supplementary application requirements and deadlines. So some schools require additional testing that others do not. For example, the MCAT, I believe that 6 of the 17 schools don't require the MCAT. So look into the way your MCAT will be assessed and the different thresholds and if it would be beneficial for you or not. Then there is also the CASPER test, which is a situational judgment test that uses psychology to assess behavioral tendencies and to an extent your ethics. So as of January 2020, there are 6 schools that require CASPER in Canada. That includes Alberta, Dalhousie, and McMaster. I've attached a link below with the list of Canadian and US schools that require the CASPER test. Although the amount of preparation and cost associated with this exam is fairly minimal compared to the MCAT, it is additional testing that you have to plan for either before or after you submit your application, so this might be something to consider. And in addition to testing, different schools have different requirements for supplementary essays. Some schools have additional essays that you need to submit, so take note of the time and work you will require. So now references. I've created 4 key steps to selecting references. First, consider who should be your reference. For me, I made a list of people in my life who were not family, friends, or peers, because you obviously can't use those people, that I felt had a good image of me and could speak about my attributes, research, work experience, and my journey to medical school at length. I considered who I thought would write me a great reference, not just a good reference, but a great one. Then I looked through the reference requirements of each school I was applying to and narrowed my list based on this information. Next, I looked up the questions that each reference would be asked to answer by each school, as a lot of schools have a manual for referees, or post the questions they will ask the references somewhere on their website. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find. You have to go through a rabbit hole to get there, but for me personally, I found all the questions for references for the 5 schools I applied to were posted somewhere online. And then from there, I narrowed down who I thought would be able to answer those questions best. I also looked at the CanMed's framework and then prioritized the references that would have interacted with me in a manner that would have allowed them to see these CanMed competencies in me. I also prioritized those who had known me longer and could speak about my personal and professional growth. And if possible, look for someone who has previously written you a great reference. I highly recommend doing this, as this may offer you a higher level of security, as you already know that they will write you a great reference. So number 2, now that you've chosen your reference, you can go to the next step, which is asking for the reference. You can do so by emailing the person, asking in person, or over the phone. Personally, I just liked to email people, as this allowed there to be like a paper trail of our interaction. Let them know what type of questions they would be asked to answer, and ask them if they would feel comfortable specifically discussing certain activities or characteristics. For me, I made sure that between the 2 to 3 references I gave for each school, the majority of the CanMed competencies, if not all, were covered between my references. So that doesn't mean that, all the CanMed competencies were answered by each person. It was just like they might answer 2 to 3 CanMed competencies, and then like the second person answers another 2 to 3, third person answers another 2 to 3. In terms of credentials of references, I don't really, I can't say this for a fact, but my understanding is that credentials of the references doesn't matter as long as they're not family or friend or someone really close to you. I know some people will try to get references from people with like the fanciest titles and occupations, but if that person doesn't know you well enough to give a great reference, or if they might be way too busy given their, fancy credentials, then that might not be the best reference. But it could also be that you have someone that knows you really well that has amazing credentials, and so you choose them. Okay, so the third thing to look at is the documents to send your references and how you can support them. So try to create an information package for each respective reference or per school. So maybe create some links to appropriate documents or forms that talk about the reference. Attach a list of relevant extracurriculars or life experiences that you want them to know about related to this reference. Include deadlines for each reference. I personally recommend setting deadlines for submission 3 to 5 days before the official deadline. I personally just had references that I knew that knew me really well, but again, they were super busy. And in the past, from my interactions, they had submitted things to me very last minute, and so that personally scared me, and I chose to tell all of my references that the actual deadline was like 2 days before it was. And I'm so happy I did this because lo and behold, one of my references, who I did expect would do this, day of the deadline I gave them at 11:59 p.m. they emailed me panicking saying, oh my gosh, I can't get this in, I'm having this computer issue, whatever. But yeah, that was really scary, but because we were close and I was aware about their tendencies with deadlines, I had already asked them to do it a couple days ahead, so I didn't panic. And so the fourth thing is your timeline for outreach. When should you be asking for references? Ultimately, this depends on you and that reference, and how your relationship is with that reference. But I feel like, me personally, I like to ask at least 3 weeks ahead. So if your deadline is October 1st, you should be asking, first week of September at minimum. If you can let them know even earlier than that, that's great, but don't let them know 6 months ahead, because again, they'll probably forget. I think a normal person would forget. I would probably forget. But personally, I asked all of my references about 1.5 months ahead, so about 6 weeks ahead, and then send them periodic reminders, and make sure that they're actually replying to those reminders. So I sent I asked about 6 weeks ahead, and then I sent reminders every 2-3 weeks to my references, and also be strategic with this. It might come off rude being hey, just a reminder, you have to submit this, you have to submit this. Instead, I just kept checking in and saying, hey, is there anything that you wanted to ask me? How's the reference going? Do you have any questions? Is there any way I could support you? And make sure that they're actually replying to you. This didn't happen for medical school applications, but for another scholarship application, I've had a reference who I didn't know, just for whatever reason, wasn't getting my emails. And so they had already agreed initially. I had kept checking in, and then it was a day or two before I saw them in person, and then they had this moment of panic because they hadn't gotten my email. So make sure that your references are actually replying to you.
Now, most medical schools will also typically require you to list and describe extracurricular activities and experiences that you've been involved in. As prospective medical students, you likely have a multitude of diverse and unique experiences, which raises the question as to which experiences should I share. So the first tip that we have for this is to select experiences and activities that you can speak holistically about. Before the application, find time to sort of just sit down, brainstorm all the major experiences that you've had since, say, grade 10, then slowly narrow down that list to experiences that have had the most impact on you or have allowed you to have the most impact on others. Now, this could be research, endeavors, advocacy work, volunteerism, leadership, sports, personal adversity. The point being to cast a very wide net and have a very wide range of experiences that you can speak on and really show how much of a well-rounded applicant that you are, because you are. Second tip, don't make up or exaggerate your experiences. The reviewers can and will tell if you do. It's not worth it. You really don't have to, have been involved in finding a cure for X disease or creating an app that ended world hunger. Just be your authentic self. Be confident in your own unique abilities and your own unique experiences. Pick the most valuable experiences, not the ones that sound the most impressive. So now that you've narrowed down your list of activities, we recommend brainstorming some themes and concepts that can really help tie your experiences together. Select one or two words that truly encompass the entire experience or activity as a whole. And this serves, multiple purposes. First being, it allows you to tailor your writing around that keyword for each respective activity or experience. The second, you can use those keywords to help tell a story through your experiences. And the third, it really helps to ensure that you have a nice balance of activities and experiences that speak to different attributes of your character. Now, we previously also mentioned familiarizing yourself with the CanMed roles, and along with this tip is to show, not to tell, how you reflect these CanMed roles. There really is no benefit in saying, I am a scholar, I am a collaborator, when you could use your experiences to show those, attributes. And along with this tip is just to sort of remember that you really shouldn't get bogged down in trying to find experiences that tick all the CanMed roles. Your activities and experiences can and really should speak on other, attributes like resilience or emotional intelligence or global citizenship, just to name a few. Now, when you're composing the written components of your applications, always ask yourself, how will this activity or experience make me a better doctor? When you have that answer in your head, find a way to clearly communicate that to the reader. You will have a word limit on these applications, so it's really important to make every word and every sentence count. Your list of experiences and activities will also come into play when you're writing your supplementary applications and essays, such as U of C's Top 10 or U of T's written essays, just to name a few. Really, the biggest tip that we have for this is to start early. Give yourself enough time to make multiple drafts, to have multiple readers give you feedback. Research into each respective school's values and strengths to really ensure that you're portraying yourself as an ideal candidate for their medical school. Read through essay questions and use your initial brainstorming of experiences to ensure that you're selecting, the most relevant and most pertinent experiences and activities more in-depthly.
So next, consider whether the school has any special application programs or streams that might be relevant or beneficial to you. There are programs out there for Indigenous students, Black students, students with disabilities, rural students, students from low socioeconomic status, Francophone students, students from specific locations, students from one-parent homes, and many other situations. So for example, U Toronto, Dalhousie, and as of this year, U Calgary and U Alberta all have some form of a Black student application program in place that works to reduce any implicit bias Black students may face in the regular stream for applications. So if you are a Black applicant who rightfully fears being assessed unfairly due to bias, you may choose to prioritize applying to schools that have recognized and tried to minimize this barrier for you. And while this video is for anyone applying to Canadian medical schools, our entire channel is dedicated to supporting students that come from underrepresented, marginalized, and non-traditional backgrounds. So I will emphasize that the cost of applying to medical school alone is a huge barrier for many of the students we are hoping to serve. So the MCAT is about 420 Canadian dollars, not including taxes, or the prep books, or potentially the prep courses you may need, which all together cost thousands of dollars. asking a low-income student who just spent thousands on preparing for and completing their MCAT to now pay $150 to $200 per application might be enough to deter them completely. If this is a concern you really need to plan ahead about how you're going to budget everything. For me, the cost of applications for just 5 schools was 955 Canadian dollars, which, coming from my economic background, meant I had to start planning and saving a year prior to be able to afford it. You can look up the application fees for each school on the websites, and also note that for Ontario schools, in addition to the cost of applying to each school, there's a $200 fee for the OMSAS service. And again, consider, if admitted, can you afford the cost of living and tuition in certain cities and at certain schools?
And now for some final tips. Try reaching out to other medical students or previous applicants to hear about their experiences. But at the same time, always keep in mind that those will be personal experiences. So just don't allow them to really influence your perceptions of programs or even your perceptions of your own abilities too much.
The most important thing is editing and getting second opinions. Get as many second opinions as possible without losing your story and your original vision for your application. Again, this is your application. But if you do have a group of friends that you trust will be good to work with, I found this method to be very helpful. The key word here is trust. Now, I know that there is this notion that people interested in medical school are really competitive. They're cutthroat and willing to do anything and hurt anyone to get in. While I don't know the extent to which this is true, it is a possibility, and so you want to make sure that those are not the people you include in your group. Our group discussed this very openly beforehand, and we said that in order for this group to work, everyone had to be completely genuine and support one another without any hidden agendas. Medical school applications may be competitive and not everyone will get in the first few tries, but we just made a pact that if only a small minority of applicants for each school gets admitted, we would be part of that small minority together, and that if there was competition of any sort, the competition would not be fostered within our group. And finally, submit ahead of time as much as you can, at least 2 days ahead, as you don't know if the system will crash or overload, if an emergency comes up in your life, etc. Just submit ahead. Yeah, you don't want to have worked your whole life to this point and then just something happens and you don't make that deadline. Try your best, at least 1 day ahead, if not 2 days ahead, to submit your application. So good luck.
So final tip, it's completely okay if you don't get in the first time or the second time or even the 5th time. There is a bit of luck with this application process. So regardless of the results of the application, always remember, if it doesn't work out, right away or right now, it doesn't make you any less worthy to be a doctor or your experiences and academic achievements any less remarkable. So thank you for joining us. Really do hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe if you want to support us and keep up to date with our future videos. And don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. And if you didn't enjoy it, still give this video a big thumbs up or thumbs down, because we want to know that too. Comment below with your requests for content you'd like to see in the future, or even suggestions of how we can improve our future videos. Now that is all from us. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.